Well, good afternoon. This is your host, Michael J. Long, and thank you for joining me. I appreciate it. Let's see if we have the proper live stream here. And I think, we're offline. Hmm. Oh, it's still, no, actually, it's online. Sorry about that. Um, so again, I'm Michael J. Long, and thank you for joining me. I appreciate it. It's 4:27 p.m. on May the 14th of 2020. Thank you. Thank you. I sincerely appreciate it. Today I wanted to read to you this article that I found, and it's about Amash, our great. No, I can't say. Well, I don't know. He hasn't been nominated yet by the Libertarian National Convention delegates, but I want to read to you this as objectively again as I possibly can. And I know I'm not perfect, but let me just read it to you. It was published on Reason. The title reads Justin Amash's confusing and contradictory immigration record. And it was written by Shakia Delama, whatever her name is. His mixed immigration record might be good for a Republican, so that she entices her opinion on here, but it's not exactly impressive for a libertarian. So let me see if I pull that up. Maybe I can read it in further detail. The Libertarian Party has always stuck up for a mobile, which is true, has always stuck up for mobility rights, uneducated, uncumbered by political barriers. In other words, for open borders. If its commitment to economic freedom has distinguished it from the Democratic Party, its commitment to freedom of movement, along with civil liberties and reproductive rights. Well, I don't know personally if I agree with the abortion plaque of the Libertarian Party, but it goes on to say, as distinguished it from the Republican Party. So its platform, the Libertarian Party, has been distinguished from that of the Republican Party, which is true. A truly free market requires the free movement of people, not just products and ideas. The party's platform's immigration plank declares, which true, because if you read it, that's exactly what it's saying. But so one key question for the five-term Michigan Representative Justin Amash, a former Republican who recently joined the Libertarian Party, is whether he will advance the commitment or dilute it if he succeeds in getting the party's presidential nomination. He's called out President Donald Trump on his hateful anti-immigration rhetoric when his eastward Republican comrades have either stayed silent or played along. When Trump called immigrants invaders and contemplatively told Representative Ahan Omar or Representative Omar from a Democrat from Minnesota, who immigrated from Somalia as a child to return home. Amash voted in favor of a resolution condemning these comments, but his voting record on legislation and explanations for his votes point a mixed picture. At best, despite his well-deserved reputation as one of those rare politicians who puts principles above party or president, he's got a meddling habit of splitting the baby when it comes to immigration. He's certainly less restrictive than every other Republican out there right now. And this is just something that I'm reading. It goes on to say, including even self-styled Trump nemesis, Senator Mitch McConnell, or Mitt Romney, Republican of Utah, who during his own failed presidential bid in 2012 misused about making life so miserable for undocumented immigrants that they'd self-deport. But notwithstanding Amash's other virtues, he seems less pro-immigration than his libertarian rivals. Which was just basically her viewpoint on it. Then this was evident during Saturday's Libertarian presidential debate in Kentucky when Jacob Hornberger, the former Libertarian think tank of Future Think for Future of Freedom Foundation revealed about the party's 1990 platform that unanimously called for the elimination of all restrictions on immigration and the abortion of the Immigration and Naturalization Service and Border Patrol. He chastised Amash nothing as being so he castigated Amash as being nothing that the congressman claimed to love for freedom and enterprise, but went along with the evil, immoral, socialist central planning. So now she's quoting Hornberger, who says that Amash had nothing that the congressman, there was nothing that the congressman, referring to Amash, there's nothing that the congressman claimed to love for free enterprise, but went along with the evil, immoral, socialist central planning of the Republican Democratic system of immigration controls, which has brought death and suffering to countless people and resulted in a brutal police state consisting of highway checkpoints and other limitations of force against innocent people. Meanwhile, Joe Jorgensen, the 1996 LP nominee for vice president, who promised to immediately stop construction on President Donald Trump's border wall, bondled and worked to eliminate quotas on immigration so that anyone who wishes to come to America could do so legally. She asked Amash point blank if he would do the same. He refused to answer, just as he did repeated requests from Reason for an interview for this piece. In public comment 2 years ago, Amash noted that it is important for America to remain welcoming country where immigrants like his dad from Palestine and refugee from Ramallah feel that they have the opportunity to come and start a new life. A few weeks ago, he told Reason's Nick Gillespie that he supports immigration and wants to fix our immigration system so that people can come here lawfully. Still, when he was a Republican in Congress, he too often ended up on the pro-immigration side for narrow procedural reasons, not fundamental principle ones. Indeed, Amash repeatedly said he agreed with several restrictionists and disagrees merely on the means deployed to achieve them. In a 2013 letter, Amash co-signed in support of Senator Rand Paul's effort to alleviate the GOP's tone on immigration. Back before Paul found his inner restrictionists, Amash said that immigration reform should be treated like a three-large stool that combined expanded legal immigration with enhanced border security by both the physical border and virtual border of visa enforcement. Last year, even as he became the sole Republican to join a Democratic bill to stop Trump from declaring a national emergency to seize funds to build his wall, while criticizing his fellow Republicans for trading massive wasteful spending in exchange for a wall funding. He assured everyone that he doesn't have an inherent objection to a border wall. As far as visa enforcement, he says he's skeptical of E-Verify, a program that requires employees to check whether they are hires who have work authorization against a federal database, because enforcement of immigration laws is the government's job. For private businesses shouldn't be asked to do it for them. But that opens the question of how far he is prepared to let the government go to do this job. Is it acceptable for the IRS to conduct adult raids, as it is under President Barack Obama, or for Immigration Customs Enforcement, or ICE, to conduct physical raids on businesses, as it did under the Presidents George W. Bush and now Trump, to first out undocumented immigrants? Amash's record has also a mixed record when it comes to defending sanctuary jurisdictions. Last year, he voted against the No Sanctuary for Criminals Act, a pundit law that sought to strip certain federal funds from sanctuary cities that refused to cooperate with Uncle Sam's deportation efforts. But his objections did not center around anything morally objectionable about this particular bill, just that it went too far. In fact, he went out of his way to assert that in the past he had voted to defund sanctuary cities. In the same vein, he voted against Kate's Law, which was named after California's woman it was named after a California woman who was accidentally shot by a so-called unauthorized immigrant who was later acquitted on murder charges. That law sought to strip immigrants accused of legal re-entry of, as a felony of the right to challenge their removal order while they were being criminally tried. Amash, to his credit, noted that eliminating this right was unconstitutional, yet he did not go as far as to question the criminalization of unauthorized entries in the first place, which should have been a no-brainer for a self-described small libertarian or a small L libertarian. Among Amash's most inspired actions as a congressman was his vote 2 years ago against a Republican plan to put Democrats on the spot by forcing them to vote on a resolution supporting ICE, an agency with a history of brutal border enforcement. So when Trump's implemented his zero tolerance border policy and started separating babies and other children from Central America migrants, moms seeking asylum, the progressive left joined long-standing and admittedly unpopular libertarian calls to abolish ICE. The Republicans' resolution tried to exploit that, praising the heroic law enforcement officers who make sacrifices every day to secure our borders, enforce our laws, and protect our safety and security, and daring Democrats to vote against it. Amash condemned his fellow Republicans and demanded to know why a party that has historically counseled vigilance against an overwhelming federal government would treat a federal agency as though it has betrayed a reapproach and reform. But he did not go so far as to join calls to abolish ICE. As far as zero tolerance for border immigration enforcement, all Amash could bring to himself was that the government shouldn't forcibly separate families seeking asylum in the United States unless absolutely necessary. One would be hard pressed to find that the statement by Amash noting why providing asylum and humanitarian imperative, particularly for a nation founded by people fleeing prosecution. Also, price-worthy was Amash's slam of Trump's so-called Muslim travel ban in 2017, which barred entry for all refugees for 120 days and barred entry for foreign nationals from 7 predominantly Muslim countries for 90 days, even as the most other Republicans stayed. Amash called the ban unlawful and extreme. He besieged Trump to work with Congress if he wanted to change immigration law. But here again, Amash diluted his message by acknowledging the need for more vetting of refugees, despite the fact that the refugees at the time were already being subjected to a multi-year review, and that the number of Americans killed in a terrorist attack by refugees since 1980 is exactly 0. Since then, Trump has gutted the refugee program that Amash's own dad used to come to the country, slashing the annual refugee cap from 110,000 during Obama's term to 1,800 during 18,000, I think it was, an all-time low. But since this is within Trump's executive authority, Amash hasn't bothered to really protest. It's as if only the legality of the president's actions matter, not their morality. Amash hasn't just hammered and hemmed and hawed when opposing anti-immigration proposals. He's also slapped down pro-immigration measures for unclear reasons. Amash claims he supports the legalization of dreamers, folks who came to the country as minors without proper authorization and have been ever since, with hardly any contact or time to spend in their birth land. But last year he voted against the American Dream and Promise Act, which would have created a path to lawful permanent residence and eventual citizenship for dreamers who want certain straitened conditions. If the Supreme Court this summer upholds Trump's decision to scrap Obama-era deferred action against childhood arrivals or DACA program, which handed dreamers temporary legal status, Trump could eject them from the country mess. The bill never made it to the Senate, but Amash's vote is puzzling since he criticized Obama for using his executive authority to create DACA and then Trump to when it used his authority to eliminate the program. Amash urged Trump to work with Congress, yet when Congress, which was abducted the issue for 2 decades, took a stab at protecting Dreamers, Amash balked even as 7 of his Republicans voted for it. Amash also voted for an amendment that prohibited funds for the military assistance virtual national interest or not MANV program, which because the program was extended to DACA recipients, the creative program which has escaped Trump's assault is brainchild of a conservative Federalist Society lawyer who received MacArthur's Great Genius Grant for it. It allowed the Army to recruit legal immigrants who have skills considered to be the vital national interest and give them a path to permanent residency and citizenship. By Heritage Action, the lobbying arm of the Conservative Heritage Foundation, dubbed the extension of the program to DACA holders, amnesty, and urged Republicans to vote against the amendment to defund it. That's exactly what Amash did. Amash also voted on no last year's Farm Workers Modernization Act after he quit the GOP. This bill would have expanded the H-2A visa program and allowed farmers not just hire more foreign guest workers, but to do so for the full year instead of only seasonally. It would have also permitted undocumented aliens to obtain permanent residence if they had worked in a domestic agriculture for at least 10 years and were willing to continue working in the industry for an additional 4 years. The bill contained an ill-advised verifying mandate for farmers and certainly an affront to civil liberties, but it would suggest a strange and selective premonition if that's what turned Amash against the bill, given his support for wall defunding, sanctuary cities, and enriched refugee vetting. All of this and more has earned Amash a career score of 81%, a solid B+, and a recent score of 66% from Numbers USA, a rapidly restricted outfit. Amash's immigration record might be heroic for a Republican, but it is tamed by libertarian standards and confusing too. He has repeatedly tried to reassure libertarians that he intends to earn the party's nomination by addressing concerns and explaining himself. If he's serious about that, he ought to clarify where exactly he stands on an issue that is central for his new party and that is going to be a major national issue as restrictivists force ramp up to turn Trump's current temporary pause on immigration into a permanent one. So I can attest to some of Amash's confusing records. First off, by specifying that, when I was younger, and I first got involved in politics when I was about, I want to say it was 2008 when I first got involved in politics. Now, it might not mean much by today's standards, but, let's think about it like this. I was against for a while. I'm just saying I can attest to Amash's confusing records. I was against illegal immigration, right, for quite a number of years. I was when I first was introduced by my mother into politics, I was kind of on the same boat as Amash. I was, I was wanting kind of the same standards that if I was in Congress would have voted in favor of, and that includes being against, being in favor of enforcement of these visa program enforcement, building a wall, having border patrol and virtual surveillance and checkpoints all over the country, and going after people who didn't have identification or proper identification to prove that they were illegal residents or U.S. citizens. But over the years, And you could see earlier videos where I made my point clear on immigration, that that was the way I thought, that's the way it was at the time. But my views have shifted over the years. And now I don't see the building of a wall as something that needs to be done or congruent. I think we can. Uh, I don't think we need to have as strict of. I don't think we need to have a so-called border security enforcement at that level when we shouldn't have it. So if you compare my views now to what they were then, you can see a lot of inconsistencies with my views from on immigration from then to now. Because now I am a complete open border advocate and a libertarian, a minarchist libertarian on that matter. That I'd much rather we make it easier as possible to allow people to come in with into the country and get legalized with legal residency among those who are currently here illegally. And then if if a small element of them or whatever commit violent crimes and offenses, we can then have them individually prosecuted for those offenses and then deported. So in that sense, we can deport on a case by case basis on the premonition that, hey, this person actually raped so and so, or did this, or committed this violent offense, or that violent offense, that we could say, yeah, this is the reason why we should prosecute. And granted, if the prosecution finds and the jury or whatever finds that this particular individual is guilty and the punishment by the DA is deportation, then that person gets deported, and that's that. But other than that, I don't think we need to have this full onslaught that I thought was good at the time. So you can see the inconsistencies there, but but I would go as far as to say this, and in response to the article, that I am also pro-life, in the sense that I don't agree with allowing women, or even the idea of women being allowed the right to, or even just the idea of women being allowed to abort a fetus or a, a baby from within their womb instead of carrying it full term and giving birth. You see where I'm going with this? So I'm pro-life. I identify as being pro-life. I don't see myself as being pro-torturous or pro-murder in that sense, or pro-choice, or whatever you want to call it. So while I do support allowing ICE, their power should be restricted to maybe only going after those that have actually been convicted, that are already in the custody of the prison system, for them to be deported, those particular individuals, and that can be handled by ICE or Customs Immigration Enforcement. Then we can keep ICE Customs to be, along with Border Patrol, to be pencil pushers to legalize and provide a pathway to legal residencies to as many people as possible. But aside from that, with immigration set aside, and I'm just saying, even with my libertarian views, and I am a libertarian, I'm a minarchist libertarian, if that, uh, that supports the retainment of Social Security, Medicaid, Medicare, chips, because people with disabilities depend on them. But, as well as maybe unemployment. But all these other federal government agencies, we should abolish. We should get rid of them. The FBI, the CIA, the NSA, NASA, Department of Education, Department of Energy, Housing and Urban Development, and all these other federal government agencies and all these other law enforcement agencies at the federal level, definitely the NSA, the CIA. So I can see abolishing all that and maybe privatizing the VA the U.S. Postal Service, and so so I implementing the fair tax, getting rid of the income tax, and supporting civil liberties, gay marriage, and all that. So I am definitely a libertarian. I actually do see Amash as being a libertarian. Was he always a libertarian? I don't know. He's been a small libertarian for a long time. Maybe he started out as a conservative. I don't know. But, that's all up to the voters and who they want to vote for. And it's going to be up to the delegates of the National Convention of the Libertarian Party, which will be held on May 22nd of 2020. I think it's going to be online to decide whether he should win the nomination or whether it should go to Jim Gray or whoever. But with that said, I don't see Amash as being, an anarcho-capitalist libertarian full blown. But I don't see him as someone who's not a libertarian or by any standards, a conservative. I see him as maybe not as 100% as me, as a minarchist libertarian, but maybe to a certain extent, um, to a certain portion, yes. Um, but I'm pretty sure that, like Amash and like myself, I think it's clear that for me personally, I want to see a society where people can decide for themselves what they choose to put in their own bodies, hence drugs, what they choose to put in their own body, how they choose to raise their children, how they choose to spend their money, how, so on and so forth, as long as they don't impose danger, force, or fraud to others. And I support the free market and civil liberties. And so, yeah, I get, I am a libertarian. And I believe, I don't, I can't say that Amash is perfect. And I can't say that he has a perfect voting record because surely he doesn't have a perfect voting record. But I am someone who used to go out there and say, look at me, I'm a conservative, and I'm against illegal immigration, and I'm, for stricter border control or border security or whatever, So I can kind of empathize and sympathize to a certain extent with Justin Amash, even if I don't entirely agree with his voting record, because if I were in Congress and I were like 28, I'm like, right now I'm like, 29? If I were in Congress then, I probably would have had a similar voting record by now if it was my choice to then turn around and seek the nomination of the Libertarian Party. And so, it's hard to say whether I support him or not, or because between him and Jim Gray, they're both good men. But Jim Gray kind of comes across as being a little bit more, anarchist. I don't want to say that he's fully blown anarcho-capitalist, but he doesn't strike me as being someone who's kind of on a similar boat as maybe being as much of a minarchist libertarian as me. But there are those in the Libertarian Party that would say, let's abolish everything, all the government agencies all at once, boards, commissions, and reduce the government down to its constitutional foundation. Then there are those that would say, let's get rid of the government altogether. So, there's these different views within the Libertarian Party. There's also a split with the Libertarian Party on pro-life versus pro-choice. All right. So hopefully, maybe Amash will get the nomination, or maybe Jim Gray will get the nomination. Who knows? I know he intended to have he has Larry Sharpe running as his VP. So let's say Amash wins the nomination for presidency, we can still vote for, Larry Sharpe to be VP or vice president, depending and that's if Larry Sharpe still decides that he wants that position for the candidacy of VP. And it will also be up to the delegates at that point in time. So we'll have to see how it goes. But in any case, I'm just saying I can kind of sympathize with Amash on his voting record, though it's nowhere near perfect. But we'll have to see what he's about going forward. Should he win the nomination? But anyways, Michael J. Long, and thank you for joining me. I appreciate